It will be a big win for consumers and overall safety of Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If he wishes it, the honourable member for Yellowhead will have an additional 2.5 minutes for his remarks when the House next resumes debate on the question, and of course the usual 10 minutes for questions and comments. But now we'll go to statements by members, déclaration de député, and the honourable member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the leadership and service of Dr. Mahmoud Shokri, President of York University, who completed his term on June 30th, 2017. For the last decade, Dr. Shukri has guided York University through a period of extraordinary growth and change, cementing its position as one of our preeminent institutions of higher education in Canada. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Dr. Rhonda Lenton, who has been appointed as York University's 8th President and Vice Chancellor, and began her post on July 1st, 2017. Thank you to Dr. Shukri for his dedication to our community, and congratulations to Dr. Lenton. May I wish her all the best for her success and the success of York University. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize an amazing constituent in my riding of Edmonton West. Kim Street, volunteer extraordinaire, has assisted over 50 community organizations and has helped raise over $4 million for in-need Edmonton schools. Whether it's stepping in and providing a hot lunch for schools that don't have a program, or gathering hundreds of auction items every year for St. Martha Catholic School, Kim, with the help of her tireless husband Jason, is an advocate for those in need of West Edmonton and throughout our city. Veterans associations, athletic clubs, community centers, and public schools across Edmonton have all benefited from her dedication to community service. Kim, your tremendous support of the communities in Edmonton should serve as an inspiration for people across Canada to get involved locally and help out. I urge all Canadians to take a page from Kim's book and volunteer their time for places in need. Kim, thank you for your outstanding service to Edmonton and for proving that one person can make a difference.
The honourable member for Lac Saint Louis.
Montreal's West Island has lost a true friend and stalwart. From the humblest beginnings, Nick DiTomaso rose through the ranks of Montreal's retail petroleum industry to become president of Ultramar Canada. Nick's energy and work ethic were legendary. After retiring from a stellar business career, Nick dedicated himself to strengthening Montreal's West Island community, in particular its health and social services sector. He served as chairman of the Lakeshore General Hospital and then of its foundation. He used both positions to bring major needed improvements to the hospital's facilities. Nick was also a founding member of the West Island Palliative Care Residence, a valued advisor to the West Island Association for the Intellectually Handicapped, and a fundraiser for their local women's shelter. These vital contributions were in addition to his myriad other volunteer causes and activities. The West Island is a better place today because of Nick DiTomaso. He left us a lasting legacy, and for that, our community is truly grateful.
Now, member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this month I attended meetings with the Cranbrook and Kimberley Chambers of Commerce to discuss the Finance Minister's proposed tax changes. Across my riding of Kootenay, Columbia, small business owners, farmers and professionals are all coming together to express their shock and outrage at being told that they're verging on being tax cheats and even struggling businesses will have to pay more. David Hull, Executive Director of the Cranbrook Chamber, said in a news release, "Nobody supports tax evasion or loopholes, but these changes will punish legitimate businesses. And one of my small business owners has offered to pay their own way to come to Ottawa to meet with the Finance Minister or the Prime Minister. That's how concerned he is." The people in my riding are asking the Liberal government to please extend the period for consultation, focus tax reform on closing stock option loopholes and stopping the use of offshore tax havens, and ensure they do not target hard-working small business owners who already feel betrayed by the Liberals for not cutting small business taxes. Thank you.
Well said.
The honourable member for Avignon, l'Amitié, ce matin, le Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, Fête des Chaleurs in the Gaspé Peninsula had the 4th edition of an annual event. Many athletes representing several countries, including France, Uruguay, and South Africa, competed especially in Carleton-sur-Mer. This was an exceptional ground for people who love to compete. Canada offers precious international visibility to Gaspé and to its natural beauty with the presence of many international journalists. The media attention was significant, and that means Gaspé Peninsula has become an exceptional location for tourism. I would like to highlight the exceptional work of the promoters of this event in the Gaspé Peninsula, Carleton-sur-Mer Management Company, and others. Thank you for calling attention to our beautiful region.
Member for Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, this summer, Brant MPP and Speaker of the Ontario Legislature, Dave Levac, a very good friend, and I commemorated the Canada 150 by recognizing 150 outstanding individuals from the communities of Brantford, Brant, Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. Recipients were nominated by their fellow citizens in recognition and appreciation for their significant contributions to their communities, province, and country in the categories of agriculture, arts, culture and heritage, caregiving, community building, educators, entrepreneurs, faith in action, first responders, good neighbors, legions, ladies and youth auxiliaries, seniors, youth and students, service clubs, and sports and recreation. It is my sincere hope that recipients who received the awards know how truly grateful we are for their hard work, dedication, energy, and passion. Congratulations to you all.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil, Charlemagne. Mr. Speaker, last Sunday, more than 20,000 people participated in the 10th Annual Army Run. This event recognizes the service and sacrifice of all the brave men and women in uniform as well as their families. I had the honor of running with my family, many members of the Liberal caucus, including the member for Ottawa-Vanier, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure, and the Minister of National Defence.
Our government feels strongly about our commitment to support and celebrate members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and that is why, for the first time since the Army Run began, a Prime Minister joined us and ran with our troops. Ill and injured veterans lead the way in the Army Run every year, and I think I speak for all participants who also sit in this House when I say that for those few hot hours last Sunday, it was an honor to run in the footsteps of these true Canadian heroes. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, 37 years ago, Terry Fox ended his Marathon of Hope. On September 17th, along with runs in communities all across Canada, Port Coquitlam hosted the Terry Fox Hometown Run. 3,000 participants walked and even danced across the finish line. I am reminded of Terry's words. I am not a dreamer, and I'm not saying this will initiate any kind of definitive answer or cure to cancer, but I believe in miracles. I have to. Together, the Terry Fox Foundation has raised $800 million, and we still need a cure for cancer. I encourage all members in the House and all Canadians to stay involved. And thank you to all who ran and donated. We are still searching for Terry's miracle. The traveling exhibit, Terry Fox, Running to the Heart of Canada, is open in my riding and Terry's hometown, Port Coquitlam, until the end of November. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Brandon-Souris.
Mr. Speaker, over the summer, the federal government quietly issued new regulations which decreed that credit unions can no longer allowed to use the words bank, banker, or banking. Well, Mr. Speaker, these terms have been part of the common vernacular for over a century. I've spoken to longtime credit union members who are irritated that the federal government can unilaterally make this change and waste millions of dollars. In fact, the administrative costs of the 300-plus credit unions across Canada to change and popularize other unknown terms and order new signs are estimated to be over $80 million.
Crazy.
In constituencies such as mine, the credit union is the only financial institution left in many rural communities. These are pillars in our communities and are one of the most philanthropic industries in the country. Instead of making business harder for these important institutions, we should be looking for ways to help ensure that credit unions can thrive and prosper. Here, here. I am calling on all members of this House to work together and fix this calamity and restore some common sense.
Here, here. The honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to welcome the Canadian Urban Transit Association, CUTA, to Ottawa for their annual Transit Awareness Days. Our government knows that reliable and efficient public transit gets Canadians to work, to school, and home again after a long day. And we know that this is helping to grow our economy and delivering on the promise of strengthening the middle class. I know this personally from my many years with TransLink, Metro Vancouver's excellent transportation authority. We're proud to have worked with CUTA to design versatile infrastructure programs that are meeting the needs of Canadian communities and Canadians day to day. It's through these programs that we've now approved more than 1,000 public transit projects across Canada. Working with our partners like CUTA, we're investing in the strong, sustainable communities Canadians deserve, delivering on our historic infrastructure investment for Canadian families and their growing communities. Thank you, CUTA, for all the work you do, and welcome to Ottawa.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, on September 8th, shortly before midnight, the largest earthquake in 100 years struck the Pacific coast of Mexico. The magnitude of the earthquake registered at 8.2 on the Richter scale and was felt by approximately 50 million people across the country, as far away as Mexico City. The states of Chiapas and Oaxaca, home to 9 million Mexicans, were most affected. 98 people are confirmed dead, hundreds injured, and an estimated 2.5 million people in need of assistance. Our Prime Minister shared his condolences to the President of Mexico in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake. I know that I speak on behalf of all the members of this House and all Canadians when I say that our thoughts are with those injured and with those who lost loved ones in this deadly earthquake. Canadá es un gran amigo de México. Les deseamos mucha fuerza y fortaleza en los próximos días. Sabe que Canadá siempre estamos listos para ayudar. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Government member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
I'm sorry. Speaker, tragically, this past summer, we lost our beautiful daughter, Lara, at age 23. To members from both sides of this House who sent emails, cards, flowers, and attended the visitation and celebration of her life, please know that your thoughtfulness and support were a great comfort to Almut and I at a deep time of grief. On behalf of the entire Sweet family, a very sincere thank you to the entire House. Speaker, Lara's struggle with mental health began at birth and continued until she left this earth for a new life in heaven. In spite of her own battle, Lara reached out to an extraordinary number of young people with love, hope, and even resources, though her means were minimal. In doing so, Lara reframed my thinking on whether someone has to have it all together in order to assist others. Lara was the essence of the wounded healer. I ask all in the chamber to be mindful of those who struggle with mental health. I encourage the government to continue to adequately fund the Canadian Mental Health Commission and for all Canadians to use its tools in time of need. I encourage everyone to be generous to the Canadian Mental Health Association and others who are deeply committed to the fight for mental wholeness. To Lara, will be greatly missed by all of us. God bless you.
I know I speak for all members in offering our deepest sympathies to my friend, Government member for Flamborough-Glanbrook. The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in Yellowknife, I've had the honour of attending the swearing-in ceremony for Margaret Tom, the new Commissioner of the Northwest Territories. Ms. Tom, a proud Northerner, has been councillor at Degas School in Fort Providence for the past 20 years. Mr. Speaker, I know this small community well because I also call Fort Providence my home. She has worked in counselling and education for most of her career, has volunteered her time, too many events to mention. Ms. Tom has demonstrated leadership with many organizations, including serving as a governor of the Aurora College Board, a member of the Territorial Board of Secondary Education, Keecha Hall Advisory Board, and Vice Chair of Nuts JK Treatment Center. She is a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, a member of the NBT Education Hall of Fame, and has been awarded the NBT Territorial Wise Woman Award. I send her my most heartfelt congratulations, and I know she will do a wonderful job in her new role as Commissioner. Masi Cho, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Speaker, it seems this is a week of reflection and loss. I, too, rise with a heavy heart today to pay tribute to my very dear friend, Bruce Hill, who passed away yesterday morning. Surrounded by his loving family in Terrace, British Columbia, Bruce was a great bear of a man, fierce in his defense of the beautiful Northwest, but was at his most fearsome when defending the underdog. He was a great personal support for me, and that was most evident when he was giving me hell for not living up to his expectations in defending our home and its good people. He was a lover of life, great food, and even better, wine. He gathered around him a vast and eclectic assortment of friends and troublemakers. Whether leading the fight against devastating projects or working with his Heisla brother, Gerald Amos, to establish true reconciliation, this peaceful warrior was all love. I already feel his absence in my heart today. To his wonderful wife, Anne, to his two outstanding children, Aaron and Julia, today we mourn with you. Thank you very much.
Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to tell you all about the wildfires in British Columbia. It included the longest state of emergency in BC's history. It included the largest mass evacuation in BC's history. Thousands are still out of their homes. 1,262 wildfires have burnt over 1.2 million hectares. Over 53 million cubic meters of timber has been burnt. An area twice the size of Prince Edward Island has been scorched. Over 30,000 head of cattle are missing or lost altogether. To say the wildfires have taken its toll on our province would not be an understatement. They have been devastating in my riding of Caribou, Prince George. Families have lost everything. Some are simply not returning. Businesses are struggling to recover, and some are just simply closing the doors. Now is not the time for partisan politics, but the Prime Minister's Ministerial Committee has not met with the mayors, regional districts, MLAs, or the MPs, or those left behind to somehow pick up the pieces. Mr. Speaker, we may not be on the front page of the newspaper or the top headlines in the news stories anymore, but now is the time for action.
Member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Mr. Speaker, it is my profound honour today to rise and pay tribute to a true giant in Canadian politics. The Honourable Alan J. McEachern dedicated his life to the equality of citizenship, both under the law and with opportunity. He used his perilous parliamentary skills to turn the dreams of a progressive few into the reality to benefit all. A national health care program, old age security, guaranteed income supplement, and a national labour code are aspects of life in Canada that Alan J. helped build. As our Prime Minister said Sunday, this Canada existed only in the hopes of Canadians when Alan entered politics in 1953. By the time he left in 96, it was a fact of life. And although he shaped this country at the cabinet table, make no mistake, his view of this world was very much shaped back home at the kitchen table. I'm confident he is looking down on us here today in this place, encouraging us all to be better and to do better for all Canadians.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister likes to falsely repeat that his tax changes will not hurt the middle class. But hundreds of local business owners have said that that's simply not true. These changes will also hurt employees with layoffs and reduced working hours, and it will be harder for young people looking for their first job. Why is the Prime Minister saying that he's helping hurting the people he wants to help? Mr. Speaker, we now have a tax system that encourages the wealthiest Canadians to have private corporations so that they have a lower tax rate than the middle class. This is a significant challenge. We want to have a system where small businesses have the opportunity to invest in their active investments so that they can improve our economy and so that we can have a better situation for employees and for all Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This morning, I visited Vimy Brewing Company, a startup business operated by Kevin and Michael, two brothers and former Navy reservists. They took a risk and left their jobs to start this new venture. But now they're worried that the Liberals are putting their operation in jeopardy by taxing away their future. Kevin and Michael are not rich. They are middle-class Canadians, exactly the kind of people the Prime Minister claims he wants to help. Why is the Prime Minister putting the future of Canadian job creators at risk with this increased tax hike?
Our system currently creates an incentive for wealthy Canadians to incorporate so they can pay a lower rate of tax than middle-class Canadians. That's just not fair. I suspect that the member opposite is okay with wealthy Canadians paying a lower rate of tax than middle-class Canadians. We're not. What we're trying to make sure that we have is a system that encourages people to invest in their business so that our economy can be successful, so that all Canadians have a fair system.
Hear, hear. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, 98% of businesses in Canada are small and local businesses. And we're not talking about the corporate elites at Morneau Chapelle. We're talking about the farmer who employs 5 people, or the family-run sporting goods store employing 20. Now, I know the Liberals might like to look down on these kinds of jobs, but these are the job creators who provide opportunities in our neighborhood. Can the Prime Minister explain how even one new job would be created by going after these job creators and local businesses?
Minister of Finance.
What we're saying to Canadians is a system that encourages the wealthy to incorporate so they have advantages and a lower tax rate than the middle class is just not fair. What we want to have is a system that actually does encourage investment, and that's what we're going to have for those small businesses, the businesses that employ Canadians that want to employ more Canadians. They will have a fair tax system encouraging them to invest, which is what we need for a successful economy.
The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are directly attacking our family businesses, our small businesses, and our farmers, people who work hard every single day. It's not by taxing them that will create more jobs here in Canada. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This improvised reform will cause job losses and will cause financial pain to local business owners. What will it take for the Prime Minister and his team to realize that they are endangering jobs all across Quebec and Canada? Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we don't want to have a system where the richest Canadians have advantages that aren't available to the middle class. We want to have a system where it's possible to make significant investments in your business. So we're listening to farmers, to small business owners. Yesterday, I got news from Terry, and I talked to him on the phone today to learn about his situation. I will continue to listen to ensure that we have a system that is fair, but also a system that provides advantages to the middle class. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, here's the reality. For the last week, thousands of business owners have been telling us the same thing about the tax reforms. They're going to have to cut their operating budgets. They're going to have to cut their donations that they make to community organizations. They may even have to eliminate jobs because of the Prime Minister's tax hikes. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are directly attacking our job creators. When will they finally understand that taxing more and more doesn't create more jobs? Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, a tax system that encourages the wealthiest Canadians to have private corporations and to have lower tax rates than the middle class doesn't work. That is the challenge we're facing. But it's very important that we listen so that we are certain that we properly understand how our proposals will help small businesses continue to invest. That's important, and that's why we're listening. The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Bilingualism bonus intended to encourage civil servants to learn both English and French has existed for 40 years. A Liberal report is now recommending that the federal government scrap this bonus. Does the Liberal government really plan to eliminate a bonus that helps to promote bilingualism in Canada's civil service?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's two official languages are obviously at the heart of our identity as a country and certainly at the heart of the way this government functions. We always believe, Mr. Speaker, that a bilingual public service better serves all Canadians. We respect the hardworking men and women in our public service, many of whom have learned their second language and continue to do so. And, Mr. Speaker, we will always do everything necessary to support Canada's two linguistic communities and ensure that these communities are reflected in Canada's public service at every level.
Honourable Member for Outremont.
The Minister of Fisheries didn't provide an answer that was really in line with the question because he didn't give me a clear answer. So I'll say again, the president of Impératif Français believes that this recommendation reflects an Anglophone vision of bilingualism. And the Union of Public Service Employees is skeptical too. We know that the Liberal government isn't used to consulting on this issue. They don't even have an official languages commissioner right now. But can they at least commit to consulting parliamentarians, linguistic minority groups, and unions about the bilingualism bonus before they scrap it? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, we are always interested in consulting public service unions and public servants and parliamentarians, of course. And we will consult vastly about the policy changes that may result from this. But, Mr. Speaker, know that our respect for linguistic communities and the ability of the Canadian Public Service to serve both linguistic communities will always be at the heart of everything we do. The Honourable Member for Outremont. Once again, that's not very reassuring when it comes to the bilingualism bonus. It's clear that Canada is moving toward legalization of marijuana, and the NDP supports this approach. But the Liberals have left massive flaws in their bill, and they're leaving the bulk of the work to the provinces. We know that Canadians are often turned away at the U.S. border when they admit to having smoked cannabis in the past. Well, everyone except the PM, even if they've never been convicted of the crime. What is the government doing to get an agreement with the Americans to ensure that Canadians will not be turned away from the U.S. for acts that will soon be legal in Canada?
The Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians should have every expectation that when they approach the United States border, they will be treated in a consistent, fair, and respectful fashion. We have raised that expectation with our American counterparts, and they have every right to expect the same treatment in return. But it is exceedingly important to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that each sovereign country establishes the rules for themselves. We would not tolerate the Americans writing the rules for us, just as we would not purport to write the rules for them.
Honourable Member for Outremont.
That he's never going to get turned back at the U.S. border, even though that he admitted smoking marijuana while he was a member of Parliament. We just want to make sure the same rule applies to all Canadians. Legalized marijuana will soon be a reality. It's a very important change, but we've got to get it right. The NDP supports this legalization, but the Liberals' bill will not legalize edible forms of cannabis, which is a far healthier option than smoking it. And the black market, of course, will continue to thrive under their new rules. If one of the key purposes is to eliminate the black market, why won't the Liberals fix this problem in their legislation?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we have worked extensively with all of the provinces and territories, as well as with municipalities and law enforcement across the country, to develop a comprehensive approach that will move Canada in a far more positive direction. That work is ongoing, including the full regulatory framework that will deal with cannabis in all of its forms. That work is ongoing. The objective is to keep cannabis out of the hands of children and to keep illegal profits out of the hands of organized crime, and we will make sure we have a regulatory regime that accomplishes that goal.
Order. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Liberals have a voracious appetite for attacking business owners in Canada, and that's been there for a long time. Remember what the PM said 2 years ago when he was the candidate at the time. He said that a significant number of small businesses are just a way for the wealthiest Canadians to pay less tax. Mr. Speaker, maybe the Prime Minister was looking in the mirror when he said that. The reality is that for real small business owners in Canada, they are creating jobs for hundreds of thousands of Canadians. This is arrogance and contempt. Why is this government showing contempt for small business owners who create jobs? Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to state that under our current system, there is an incentive for wealthy Canadians to have a private corporation so that they can have a lower tax rate than the middle class. And this is a significant challenge. We are currently listening to Canadians to make sure that our measures are appropriate, because that's very important. But our goal is clear. We want to have a fair system.
Louis Saint-Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, in real life, for real business owners, there are good years and bad years. That's why real business owners who know how to manage a business put some money aside, because sometimes they need that. They also put money aside for their pension. This is what the government doesn't understand. They don't understand that these business owners are responsible and prudent, unlike the government. Why is the government taxing business owners who are putting money aside? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we thoroughly understand that our current system encourages wealthy people to have corporations so that they can have a lower tax rate than the middle class. This is very important. We also know that it's important for small businesses to have the opportunity to continue to make investments in their business. That will continue. That's the fact, that's the truth, and that is what we want for the future of our country.
Member for Lethbridge.
Thank you. I'm hearing from hundreds of people in my constituency who are very concerned with these tax hikes that the Liberals are imposing on Canadians. One woman who came to me, she owns a local clothing store, and she said that she's saving up in order to hire a business manager and go on maternity leave. She's hoping to start a family. However, these changes actually defeat her ability to be able to do that. So she's feeling quite discouraged. The Prime Minister calls himself a feminist. So why is it that he insists on attacking hard-working female entrepreneurs?
Right. Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, we inherited a tax system from the Conservatives that encourages wealthier Canadians to incorporate and pay lower tax rates than middle-class Canadians. We don't think that's fair. We're going to fix it. Parental leave benefits apply to all self-employed Canadians. Doctors and other business owners are just as eligible as any other worker to participate in maternity and paternity provisions. Just because rules are legal doesn't mean they're fair. It's not fair when a budding entrepreneur who is a single mother with 2 young children has to pay a higher tax rate.
Order. Members need to not only listen to the questions, but also the answers. Order. Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, Paula, a small business owner in Kamloops, has asked me to give an unequivocal message to this government. Your tax measures are ill-conceived, heavy-handed, and will have unintended consequences. She goes on to say she's got no guaranteed income, no pension, no employment insurance, no health plans, unlike perhaps some of the advantages that the finance minister might enjoy. Will the minister stand up and justify why he is attacking Paula's future?
Yes, why? Well, Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, our existing tax rules let the wealthiest Canadians pay less taxes and bill.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member of Employment. Order.
Mr. Speaker, our existing tax rules let the wealthiest Canadians pay less taxes than millions of middle-class Canadian women and men. We inherited a tax system from the Conservatives that encourages wealthier Canadians to incorporate and pay a lower tax rate than middle-class Canadians. And just because these rules are legal doesn't make them fair. Everything this government does takes gender into account. Canada's economy depends on equity and fairness. We are focused on ensuring that Canadian women have the same opportunities as everyone else. Our economy depends on it.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Today, the Finance Minister announced that his deficit will be 80% larger than the $10 billion the Liberals promised in the last election. They're running out of money and coming after small business to pay for it. But Liberals have exempted big, publicly traded companies that are on the stock market from any of the tax increases. So millionaire owners of large multinationals will pay just 55%, while the corner store will pay 73% on investment income. How's that fair?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I appreciate the context of the question. What actually the member opposite has identified is that we announced this morning in our annual financial report that we are $11 billion better off than we said we would do in budget. What we have, Mr. Speaker, is a situation where our economy is doing very, very well. We are growing better than we've grown in the last decade. We created almost 400,000 new jobs over the last year. More Canadians are employed, and we're looking towards a better future because of the investments we've made in our economy.
Yeah. Order. The member for Carleton.
So to this finance minister, having a deficit 80% bigger than planned is the signal of success. The signal of success to Bombardier is that companies like them will be excluded from any of these tax increases because they're big enough to trade on the stock market. So the billionaire owners will pay only 55% on passive income held inside the corporation, while Stan Stewart, the roofer in my riding, will pay the new 73%. How is that fair?
Mr. Speaker, what we know is that over the last 15 years, we've seen wealthy Canadians take advantage of a system that allows them to incorporate so they can pay lower tax rates than middle-class Canadians. We don't see that that makes sense. I know the members opposite might feel that it's okay that wealthy Canadians pay a lower rate of tax, but we don't. And what we're looking to do is to make sure that our system works. That's why we're putting in measures that will actually make sure that our system encourages investment in active business, that encourages our economy to be successful over the long term, while making sure that our tax system is fair.
Order. I've asked the member for Brant privately here a number of times to try and calm himself. These are issues people feel strongly about, but we need to take our turns, speak when it's our turn and not when it's not. The
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Privacy Commissioner is concerned that American customs officers are carrying out intrusive searches of Canadians and their electronic devices. An iPhone is not like a suitcase. Searching it gives you a direct view into a citizen's private life.
Confirm once and for all that they will stand up for Canadians' rights at the border rather than playing right into President Trump's hands by giving more powers to American agents with bills like C-23 on Canadian soil. And let's not hear this talk about respecting the law, because the law is completely silent on this particular issue. Maybe we can get get an update to that while we're at it to protect Canadians' privacy.
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I hear most definitely the concerns of the Privacy Commissioner with respect to certain U.S. procedures. I also notice in the same report that he was far more positive about Canadian procedures and the work of the CBSA. This is an area where technology is emerging and changing all the time, and obviously it's an area where we will have consultations and discussions with our American counterparts to ensure that the treatment of Canadians at the border is fair and professional and consistent and respectful of the rights that they have the right to.
Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, veterans and their families are gathering on the Hill to demand action on mefloquine, an anti-malarial drug with potentially severe side effects. CF members were ordered to take mefloquine as part of a botched drug trial, and the results have been tragic. Both Conservative and Liberal governments have long ignored the calls for an investigation, leaving veterans and their families suffering. Will the minister finally do something right and initiate a study to determine the long-term neurotoxicity of mefloquine?
Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, whatever the cause, we support veterans with service-related illnesses and injuries. Every situation is unique, and we work with each veteran on their individual circumstances. The health and well-being of our veterans is our top priority.
The member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance showed yesterday that his government simply doesn't understand the experience of Canadian farmers and producers. His proposed tax changes would sound the death knell for many of Canada's family farms. The minister said yesterday that he hoped to talk to farmers about his proposal. But that's the problem. Our farmers are out in the fields bringing in the harvest, Mr. Speaker. If he's really sincere, will the minister agree to extend the consultation period and listen to farmers who will tell him out loud that his reforms don't make any sense?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Merci, Monsieur le President, and I can understand my honourable colleague. He's from a party that fully supports the encouragement of wealthy Canadians to form a tax system that means that they do not pay the rate of tax that the middle-class Canadians pay. So we're going to fix that. And along with it, I'm very proud to be able to say that we're improving the grain transportation system, a very vital part of making sure that the agricultural sector prospers. We are going to work, we have worked with farmers, we're going to continue to work for farmers, and we will make sure that farmers prosper. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, several farmers tried to communicate with the finance minister yesterday, but you know what? His voicemail's full, and nobody's listening to the messages. But what particularly concerns me is what the agriculture minister said. In fact, he hasn't said anything to defend the farmers who will have to pay for the Liberal government's out-of-control spending. I'd like to know if the minister agrees with the Prime Minister, who says that farmers and producers are rich citizens who are privileged and who are using their businesses to avoid paying taxes.
Minister of Agriculture.
Merci, Monsieur le President, and we inherited a tax system from the Harper government that encouraged wealthy Canadians to incorporate to make sure that they paid less taxes than the middle class. We think that's unfair, Mr. Speaker. But I'm certainly very proud of being part of a government that invested $100 million in science research in the agricultural sector. We have and will continue to invest in the agricultural sector to make sure they're competitive worldwide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The honourable member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals believe that it's only wealthy folks in gated communities who are going to be impacted by these punitive tax changes. Canadian farm families do not live in gated communities, and they will be impacted by these tax changes. Of course, the Finance Minister would know that if he picked up the phone and returned the calls like he promised to yesterday. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister commit today to extend the deadline on these consultations past October 2nd so the Finance Minister can keep his promise and call our farmers back?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, as I said, we want to work to make sure that we have a fair system. We want to make sure that we have a system that doesn't encourage wealthy Canadians to incorporate so they can pay a lower rate of tax than the middle class. That's really important. I assume the members opposite don't want a system where the wealthy few can pay a lower rate of tax than the middle class. That's what we're going for. I will continue to listen to Canadians. When I heard yesterday of a gentleman named Terry, I called him today. I haven't yet had the phone number for Nicole, but I'd be happy to call her too. What I'm trying to do is to listen to people across the country to make sure that our measures have the intended consequences and that we move forward with an economy that works for all Canadians.
Order. The member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jake Vermeer owns a dairy farm in my riding. Jake has told me that these massive tax increases that the finance minister is threatening to impose on all Canadians will damage this successful farm and cost jobs. Farmers often mortgage their homes, their home quarter, their land in order to expand, innovate, and create jobs for the local rural community. Why is this Liberal finance minister treating these farms as nothing more than cash cows and jeopardizing the future of farmers in Canada?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I can understand my honourable colleague he's from a party that supports that people can incorporate and pay less tax than the middle class. And the fact is, we as a government feel that that's not fair. We're going to fix that. But also for the dairy farmer, my honourable colleague must be fully aware, we invested $350 million to make sure that the agricultural sector is on the cutting edge. $100 million for the processing sector and $250 million for the dairy farmers. It's obvious, Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleagues do not want to hear this, but we have worked and will continue to work with the agricultural sector.
The honourable member for Laurier-St. Marie. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the nuclear weapons ban treaty opens for signature at the UN. Over 120 countries have approved the treaty, but not Canada. Tomorrow, also on Parliament Hill, a giant treaty will be unveiled and open for signature by all who believe in nuclear disarmament. My question for the Prime Minister and all Liberals is, will you join the thousands of people from all over Canada who will be signing the nuclear weapon ban treaty tomorrow? I'd like to remind the Honourable Member to always direct her comments through the Speaker, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our goal is certainly nuclear disarmament, and we are taking the necessary steps to achieve that. That means working hard to deliver something tangible, and in 2016, for the first time, Canada rallied 159 countries to support the passage of a resolution on the dissolution of fissile materials, a treaty in that regard. That's a huge step forward for nuclear and nuclear countries. That's a concrete step.
Today, Immigration Canada still rejects permanent residency of family members based on them having a disability. The minister has admitted this practice is, quote, outdated and out of step with what Canadians expect. The Liberals have been reviewing this issue for 2 years, and last week the minister met with the provinces, but still no action. In the meantime, the future of families like Mercedes Benitez hangs in the balance. Will the minister stop discriminating against children with disabilities and scrap this outdated provision?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the concerns raised by families confronted with this situation, and we are proceeding with an in-depth review of the situation by consulting the provinces and territories, because this comes under their jurisdiction. The minister recently raised this question at a meeting with federal, provincial, and territorial ministers, and our goal is to strike a balance between welcoming new Canadians while protecting our social services and public health care. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Addington.
Mr. Speaker, I was proud last month when the government announced it was moving forward with dissolving the old colonial vestige of the Department of Indian Affairs and is in the process of working in partnership to create 2 new departments. One focused on moving the relationship with Indigenous peoples to one based on recognition of rights, respect, and cooperation, and another department focused on improving current service delivery to Indigenous peoples. Recent comments by a member of the Conservative caucus has caused outrage. Can the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs comment on the impact these comments will have on the efforts of all Canadians towards reconciliation?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Senator's ongoing offensive comments regarding Indigenous people are ill-informed, hurtful, and simply wrong. These disturbing views expressed by a sitting parliamentarian undermine progress towards reconciliation. Her removal from the Senate's Aboriginal Committee was the right thing to do. If the Conservative leadership want to demonstrate their commitment to reconciliation, they should remove the Senator from their caucus.
The member for Markham Unionville.
Out of order.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians entrepreneurs work hard and want to ensure that their children have a better life than they did. These new tax changes will hurt these Canadians. The Prime Minister's intentions are clear. He wants to make local businesses pay more taxes to fund his out-of-control spending. This isn't fair. When will the Liberals stop their attacks on small business owners?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, we know that the party opposite was fine with tax advantages that encourage the wealthy few to incorporate, so they got lower tax rates than middle-class Canadians. We're trying to make sure the system is fair because we just don't think that works. What we're going to make sure is that Canadians can continue to invest in a small business, continue to invest in that active business to create jobs and to create economic activity. But what we're not going to do is continue with a system that encourages the wealthy few to incorporate at a rate that's lower than the middle class.
Here, here. Barry Springwater Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister appointed himself the Minister of Youth. He promised to reduce payroll taxes on youth and small businesses, but he hasn't. He promised to create 40,000 new jobs for youth, but he's lost over 18,000 jobs for youth to date. His proposed new taxes will only increase the number of young people in their parents' basements looking for work. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister find a mirror, look his Minister of Youth in the eyes, and fire him?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Youth.
Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of the investments that we've made in young Canadians, particularly after 10 years of inaction from the previous government. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, we doubled the number of summer jobs from 35,000 to roughly 70,000. Following that, Mr. Speaker, we ensured that we're ensuring that young Canadians have the funding to be able to go to university and get the education need to find the jobs that they're looking for. Most recently, Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of the fact that we invested to ensure that there's 60,000 new co-op placements to ensure that young Canadians have the experience, on-hand training experience they need to get the jobs they want. We're proud of the investments. We're going to continue to invest in young Canadians.
Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicolet.
Mr. Speaker, first they promised to lower taxes for small businesses, and then they broke that promise. Shameful. Now, with their latest small business tax grab scheme, Liberals are attacking some of the hardest working people in the country. Now, rather than focusing on expanding, investing, or hiring, local businesses are fearful. And without sufficient details on this tax grab, Mr. Speaker, it'll only get worse. My question is to the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, whose job it is to help create an environment where entrepreneurs can invest, hire, and grow. Is she proud of her government's ham-fisted approach and the fear that it's caused in our business community?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
I want to be clear. What we're putting forward are measures that are going to make sure that we don't have a system that encourages the wealthiest to incorporate so they have a lower tax rate than the middle class. We know that's important. What we're going to also continue to do is to grow our economy. That's exactly what we're achieving through the measures of investing in our economy. Creating a system that's fair, that allows the middle class to thrive, helps all of us. And that's what we're looking forward to in our economy in the future.
The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicolet.
Mr. Speaker, entrepreneurs need to hear that they are valued and desperately needed in this country. Small business needs a champion inside cabinet, and if the Minister of Small Business and Tourism can't even rise in this place to speak to her government's record, Mr. Speaker, she could choose to be that voice in cabinet. Now, Perrin Beatty of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has offered the government to sit down with local businesses in town halls across the country and really hear small business. Her colleague, the finance minister, just has refused to do so. How about it, Minister? Be the voice. Is she willing to meet with the chambers of commerce all across this country, or is she going to stay here in the Ottawa bubble?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
We want to make sure that we don't have a tax system that favors the wealthy over the middle class. What we know is that putting forward measures that will make a long-term difference is important. We also know that we need to listen, and that's why I am out. I was pleased to speak to the St. John's Chamber of Commerce last week. I'm looking forward this weekend to going to Fredericton to talk to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to hear from them. We want to get these measures right. We want to continue to encourage investment in this country. We want to do it while making sure that our tax system is fair for everyone, especially the middle class.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, Enbridge's Line 9B is a 40-year-old pipeline that crosses the Ottawa River and runs through Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Greenpeace, elected officials, and the public are very concerned. If the pipeline leaks in under 12 hours, 3 million people in the Montreal area will no longer have safe drinking water. Will the government require Enbridge to make its pipelines safer and share its emergency plans for protecting our sources of drinking water before approving any more energy projects in this region?
Mr. Speaker, the health and safety of Canadians is of primary interest to the Government of Canada. It's one of the reasons that we passed the Pipeline Safety Act, which introduced a whole new set of measures talking about insurance liabilities and talking about the necessity of cleanups in a timely way, talks about who's responsible, and in any approval of any major infrastructure project in the country, the safety and the well-being of Canadians is at the very top of our list.
Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Last month, an open-net salmon farm in Washington State released as many as 300,000 Atlantic salmon into the Pacific. Local First Nations immediately declared a state of emergency. Washington State immediately imposed a moratorium on new salmon farms. But our federal fisheries minister chose to stand by and, quote, monitor the situation. What will it take for this minister to protect West Coast wild salmon and transition these dangerous salmon farms to safe land-based closed containment?
Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, I was in British Columbia 2 weeks ago, had the privilege to discuss with my new counterpart in the provincial government of British Columbia this important issue. We share the concern of all British Columbians with respect to the escape that took place in the United States. We obviously are working with American authorities to understand exactly how that happened and understand what, if any, impact it'll have in Canadian rivers. But, Mr. Speaker, I can say to all Canadians that my colleagues from British Columbia, and in fact all British Columbians, have made it clear to this government that they want us to do everything possible to ensure that aquaculture can be done safely, and we're open to all options to ensure that this can be done.
The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, fishermen are the lifeblood of our rural and remote coastal communities in Atlantic Canada. They work hard, they create jobs, and they pay their taxes. After they pay for the repairs of their vessels and gear, pay their employees' taxes and other expenses, what little is left is put away for someday, perhaps, a modest retirement. When the minister makes changes that crush the dreams of fishermen's retirement, there's nothing fair about that. Why can't this minister see that?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege on many occasions, including this morning, to meet with fishermen, for example, from southwest Nova Scotia with my colleague, the Member of Parliament for that area. And I can tell the Honourable Member that the fishermen that we talk to want to earn their living in a responsible, sustainable way.
They understand, Mr. Speaker, the importance of middle-class Canadians having the appropriate tax structure so they can continue to thrive and support their families. So, Mr. Speaker, we will always work to ensure that middle-class Canadians benefit from a tax regime that's fair for them, and if the wealthiest amongst us have to pay a bit more, that's understandable.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says Atlantic Canadians, like my relatives, feel tax pain more than most, and that the combined tax burden is one of the biggest challenges in the region. Small business owners there have, quote, significant anxiety about the Liberals' tax plans. Hard-working, risk-taking, job-creating Canadians who don't have a family fortune to fall back on, like the PM, will suffer from this Liberal cash grab. Will the Finance Minister explain to middle-class fishermen, private contractors, small business owners, why he wants to make things so much harder for them?
Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister responsible for HoC, we work very closely with all the communities in Atlantic Canada to create economic opportunities and economic development opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises. Through HoC, for example, and our involvement as a government, we worked with Riverside Lobster to help create 40 jobs for West Nova. And in Egmont, with IO Solutions, we helped create 100 jobs, Mr. Speaker. That is why since 2015, there's been over 400,000 jobs created in the Canadian economy. That is our #1 priority, helping small and medium-sized enterprises create good quality, resilient jobs across Canada.
Now a member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. A new session of Parliament begins and the government goes right back on the charge with new taxes. I believe profoundly that the coming changes will discourage entrepreneurship and hurt those we want to help. Those are the words of a Liberal member who, like most Canadians, fears the new Liberal taxes will have adverse consequences for small business in the Atlantic region and for the future of the fisheries. Is the Prime Minister imposing this new tax to pay for his massive deficit or to budget for his next vacation? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we are considering how we can change our system to make it fairer. We currently have a tax system which encourages the wealthy to set up a private corporation to pay lower taxes than the middle class. That's unacceptable. So we are listening. We're all over the country. I'm listening constantly to make sure that our system is fair and that companies can continue to invest in their active business. The Honourable Member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, a resident in my riding, my residents, my constituents are fully aware of the benefits of these changes, and we're very interested in the progress our government has made. Canada's, in light of the strong economic growth and evidence that our plan for the middle class is working, can the Minister of Finance update us on our fiscal situation? The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, our economy is working. We're in a great situation. Today we announced our fiscal situation. We have a higher growth rate, the highest in a decade. Almost 400,000 new jobs have been created in the past year. This is a great situation. We are continuing with our investments in our economy because it's very important. But right now, there are more families with jobs. There are more opportunities for all across the country with this growth rate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, small business is the lifeblood of the tourism industry and of Canada. And campground owners and many other small business owners just like them are amongst the hardest working Canadians. And the Minister of Small Business and Tourism is simply cheerleading while her government destroys their businesses with huge new tax bills. So why has this minister stood by as family-run campgrounds are taxed for being too small to be a small business? And why isn't she standing up against this tax hike on all small businesses that will lay waste not only to the tourism industry, but to all of the Canadian economy?
Honourable Minister of Small Business.
I appreciate the opportunity to rise in this place and to remind all
Canadians that our tourism industry is doing better than ever. And they have a champion at the cabinet table because this Prime Minister and this government takes the tourism industry, takes small businesses seriously. Not only are they the backbone of the economy, they are the very people that we will continue to fight for. This year, it was Canada's 150th Confederation. We saw record numbers. 2018 will be the year of Canada-China tourism, and we expect to increase those numbers. The tourism industry is booming. This government will continue to support them, and the tourism industry is the #1 employer of youth, and we are proud of their record. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, this government is endangering the environment in the Drummond area with its disastrous management of toxic substances. 9,000 tons of toxic substances in my riding. Quebec has just served notices of violation on the Liberal government and is threatening to sue for putting highly contaminated soils in an unauthorized place. The Drummond area deserves to have its residents' health and environment protected. Is the Liberal government going to stand up and respect environmental legislation? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment Minister.
On this side of the House, take the protection of the environment very seriously. Issues such as contaminated sites are addressed through the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. We work hard to ensure that we are addressing those in a thoughtful way, and we engage with governments, including the Government of Quebec, to discuss issues as they arise.
Surrey Centre.
The situation in Myanmar is devastating. The Rohingya people are suffering the sort of violence and horrors that should be relegated to our history books. Thousands of women, children have been attacked, killed, and forced out of their homes. Will the Parliamentary Secretary to Foreign Affairs update this House on what actions Canada is taking to prevent these horrible acts against the Rohingya people?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the member for Surrey Centre for his question. Our government is seized by the unacceptable persecution of the Rohingyas in Myanmar and is actively engaged on this file. The Prime Minister and Foreign Minister have raised this at the highest level, including with Aung San Suu Kyi and Kofi Annan. They will both continue to raise it this week at the UN General Assembly. We will continue to provide our humanitarian aid to the Rohingyas and call on the Myanmar government to allow access into Rakhine State to further assess the situation. This violence has been equated to ethnic cleansing, Mr. Speaker. This is unacceptable and must cease immediately.
Honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've met with countless small business owners to discuss the Liberals' plans to raise their taxes. Most of the people I've met have a small family-owned business. Some have mortgaged their family's home and taken huge risks that they share with their spouses, and they contribute everything they have to the success of their dreams. They wanted to know how the minister intends to have bureaucrats determine the reasonableness of how they share income from the family business. When did it become the minister's job to tell families which spouse should receive what benefit for the risk that a family-owned business shares?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the challenge we have is that our system currently favors the wealthy. It allows them to incorporate so that they can actually pay a lower tax rate than the middle class. What we need to do is we need to continue to make sure that our system is fair. We are going to listen to small business owners. We're going to listen to people across the country to make sure we hear their comments. These measures are intended to make sure the system is fair, intended to make sure that everyone has opportunities. And as we listen to people, we will make sure that we take their issues and their ideas into account. But be clear, we want to move forward to make sure that our system is fair for the middle class and for all Canadians for the future.
The honourable member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, the Catalan people have elected a majority pro-independence government, and their elected officials have every right to consult their people on their future. Canada must decide now whether to respect the right to vote or to support the Spanish government's aggressive crackdown. Over 70% of Catalans in both camps want to vote, and it's up to them to decide if they want to remain part of Spain. Is the Prime Minister going to call on the UN to respect Catalonia's right to self-determination and democracy? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister said yesterday, Canada highly appreciates its friendly relations with Spain, a democratic and united Spain. The question of Catalonia is a domestic matter for Spain to resolve. We hope that the debate will be harmonious and respectful within the constitutional framework of Spain. The honourable member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, we asked the Heritage Minister yesterday to charge the GST on Netflix and Spotify just like everybody else. Her reply, we do not feel that a new tax is the solution for supporting our creators. Since this GST exemption is preferential treatment compared to other cultural creators, can the minister, in the spirit of fairness, undertake to do away the GST for all cultural products? Because either she's granting the U.S. internet giants preferential exemptions or she's against the GST on cultural products. The Honourable Heritage Minister. Mr. Speaker, we invested $1.9 billion in arts and culture, the largest investment in a long time, the only G7 country to have invested so heavily. We've decided to launch a broad consultation and conversation on how to support the arts and culture in the digital era. I would invite my colleague on September 28th to take part in my presentation of our vision for this industry. Thank you. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord is standing on a point of order. I'm not sure the earpieces are working on the other side of the House because the answers have nothing to do with the questions.
Orders of the day.
Government orders, government to the Senate.
Alors, l'honorable député de...
Oh, sure. The honourable member is rising on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, I have a request for unanimous consent to table the following motion that the House of Commons note that the Catalonian government has chosen to hold a referendum on the independence of Catalonia on October 1st, 2017, and consequently the House of Commons that the right to vote be respected. Does the member have the unanimous consent to propose the motion? No, there is no unanimous consent.
Government orders.
Resuming debate on second reading of S2, Strengthening Motor Vehicle Safety for Canadians Act.